Today we are joined by the one and only Steve Tasker. Needs no introduction. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, obviously we're here at the Team West Turf Shoot, and we thought it would be a fun time to kind of chat a little bit of football. So, we're in the off season. A lot's happened. Probably could talk for 3 hours like you do on your radio show, but maybe we'll start off just talking a little bit about what did you think about the draft for the Bills overall this year?
It was really good. Dalton Kincaid's going to make a difference. I think the position that he plays is really interesting for what the Bills might be able to do with matchups on offense. At the end of last year, and certainly things change in the offseason every year, but at the end of last year, the prevailing thought around the league was that, particularly in the AFC, that the Bills are kind of in an arms race with Cincinnati and Kansas City, and LA Chargers as well. You got to have, certainly all those teams have a good quarterback, and you've got to be able to score points at a high rate. You can never be out of a game with your offense in the shape that it needs to be in. So having the team take a guy like Dalton Kincaid, so much of late has been about guys like Tyreek Hill and guys like Steph and Jamar Chase and those guys that get separation and also outrun people. The Chiefs have done it with Travis Kelce and other guys, a lot of interchangeable guys. The Bills with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid put a defense in, if you think you project what you think is going to happen, it gives them a matchup decision to make, and the Bills will theoretically have the ability to take advantage of whatever decision the defense makes. So if they can get to that point, drafting a tight end like Kincaid gives them another facet of an offensive scheme that they can win with. And if you've got more ways to win, you're tougher to defend. Right.
Obviously, Josh Allen, member of Team Western here, but he seemed pretty excited about Dalton Kincaid. Maybe from your perspective, though, obviously there maybe a little bit of confusion over, well, why are the Bills taking a tight end? They have Dawson Knox. They've invested in him. Maybe more of a glorified slot receiver than a traditional tight end. Can you kind of explain maybe the difference why they would take a tight end, quote unquote, so high? Because they're not the same player.
Right. Even if they don't think Dalton Kincaid is as good as a wide receiver or whatever, that they'll have to make a decision on whether to play him with a linebacker, a safety, or a corner in some sort of man coverage. And whatever decision they make, if they go with a corner, theoretically, you could split him out or bring him in tight, and then they've got a lighter guy, a smaller defender in the box where you can, with the offensive line additions they made, you think maybe you could steamroll some people and run the football a little bit more effectively and get them into a bind. So if they do have to answer with a safety or even better yet, a linebacker, then all of a sudden you can break out of that tight formation, split Dalton Kincaid out, or split Dawson Knox out as well, spread them out, and you've got big linebackers in space trying to cover guys who can really separate. That's the idea. And I don't know that they'll go what percentage 12 personnel, two tight end personnel would be on the field, but certainly it's going to be more than they've done in the past. Last year they were 90%, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 back, 11 personnel. I would anticipate that being changed this year depending on how Dalton Kincaid folds into the offense.
And obviously some of that, what they do with Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, the offense falls on Ken Dorsey to execute that and kind of decide what he wants. What do you see for Ken Dorsey in his second year with the team? Because obviously a little bit of growing pains sometimes when you're in your first year. They didn't drastically change the offense after Brian Dable, but what do you think we can expect from Ken Dorsey in year 2?
It'll be interesting to see because we really don't know. Last year, they were second in the league in scoring. They had no problem scoring points. They moved the football really well. They got out of the gates fast. This year, they're going to have a much younger but a much bigger wide receiver core. I mean, bigger. Each guy is bigger. They got guys 6'2", 6'4", 6'1". Khalil Shakir is one of the smaller ones at 6 foot, along with Steph Diggs. The only guy they have that's undersized is Deontay Hardy, who is a specialized guy who's really special. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a weapon for them. So the wide receiver core is younger and bigger than they have been in the past. And so they're going to look a little different to defenses as they come out of the huddle. And with the guys like Sherfield, Hardy, who have gotten a lot of snaps in the league, you got to feel like you've got some guys that can really make some hay. I really think Ken Dorsey's going to be able to be creative. He'll have some dependable targets out there. I think if they can do really two things that really have nothing to do with the offensive coordinator, just don't turn it over and don't drop passes, or just cut both those maybe in half or even by a third. If you do that, this is still a team that only lost 3 games all of last season, or 4 games all of last season, and 3 of them were by a total of 8 points. So all of a sudden you climb up, and all of a sudden you could be the 1 seed just with the offensive changes you've made. So I think that's where they're at, and I think that's what the expectation has to be for Ken Dorsey.
And another offensive position group is the running back position. I think that's something, the Bills have perhaps struggled with finding the right mix of guys, or how to maybe utilize the running back position. And they've added some new faces to that room. They lost a face in Devin Singletary. But how do you feel about that group? And are they finally in a position maybe to take some of that pressure off of Josh from having to be the top rusher on the team?
Yeah, I think Josh is always going to have his chances to run the football because he pulls it down in the passing game, every once in a while. That's always going to be a part of the game. I think most people, when they talk about Josh running the ball, are when we saw early in his career the called quarterback runs, and we've seen less and less of that as the years have gone on. Last year, it was not really a big part of what they did, although you saw it once in a while. Josh was a guy who, he ran the ball when they were throwing the ball instead of throwing it. So, but with Damian Harris and Latavius Murray in the backfield and James Cook, they've got big dudes who can really run and who have some experience in the league. And they've got James Cook who can really catch. He's a great receiver and has that ability as well, with Nyheim Hines behind them, who's a speed guy. The wide receivers are younger and bigger. The running backs are bigger and faster, and I think more athletic as a group, which gives Ken Dorsey all that. And in short, I think the Bills have done everything they could to keep up in this arms race we're talking about in the AFC. I think they really have enough weapons to do that, and it's going to be exciting to see. It should be sky's the limit, and I think the biggest factor in having the Bills improve from where they were a year ago is in their locker room and their meeting room. Has nothing to do with the teams they're going to play.
Yeah. Okay, and just kind of taking you through the offense here, and I keep hitting you, but here offensive line too. That's something that's made a lot of protecting Josh. We have Deion Dawkins. We know he protects the blind side, but they've made some additions on the offensive line, trying to, I think, shore that up and make sure week in and week out Josh is protected. He can do his thing. What do you see for the offensive line this season?
Much bigger interior line with Connor McGovern and David Edwards. Also with Butker coming back. Dion, Spencer Brown, Shelley, the guy they got from Miami. They've got some guys. Kessenberry is back. This offensive line is, again, significantly bigger than it was a year ago. I think Connor McGovern is a guy they really targeted early, and he's the first guy they signed of any note. And it was obvious. The guy's a big dude. So is the other guard that they've signed as well. Osiris Torrance, who they drafted, is a big dude. Yeah. So I think you can see they wanted to get bigger. They wanted to get more physical at not only at offensive line, but also in the run game with Latavius Murray and Damian Harris, but also on the outside with their wide receivers. Those guys are bigger as well. They got younger outside. They got better on the interior of the offensive line. I think they showed a lot of faith in Spencer Brown, understanding what he was going through last year. He had a couple of nagging injuries that he managed to play through, but his play suffered for it. I don't know if all Bills fans were appreciative of that, but I think the team was, and they proved it by making sure that he knew it was going to be his spot. Now, they brought Shelley in late to compete, and Kessenberry is still here, but I think they feel really good about the guys up front. And with the running backs that they signed as well, I think their running game will be, even if they run it less than they did a year ago, it could be more effective.
And one position group, we don't talk a ton about the group as a whole in terms of the room, but the quarterback room, obviously led by Josh Allen. You return Matt Barkley from the practice squad, some consistency there. But they do bring in a new face in Kyle Allen, who actually is Josh's good friend off the field. What does that sort of thing mean to a quarterback room when you try to show that consistency, or at least, in case something does happen to Josh, he does play a physical way. He's a similar type of quarterback to Josh. So kind of what does that bring to the room there?
Well, having Kyle there, it's always good to have a guy you trust personally. who's good friends with you because they're friends. Kyle can say things to Josh nobody else can say, and unflattering things, and criticisms and things like that, where everybody else is a little bit hesitant to do that. Even his coaches are kind of Kyle can say it. And also, you got to remember too, a quarterback room in the NFL is not about having 3 guys and getting them ready to play. It's about the whole room. The quarterback coach, the 2 backup guys, the practice squad guy, and the offensive coordinator. It's about getting one guy ready to play, and that's Josh. Those guys are focused on getting Josh ready to play and to play his best. That's how the room should work. Certainly, there's always, but if Josh Allen goes down, all bets are off on how the team's going to be anyway. But the focus has to be day in, day out, week in, week out, is to get that guy ready and to make him better and better every week and support him. You got to have guys that are wired the right way behind him to do that. Like Matt Barkley's perfect guy for doing that, and Kyle Allen, obviously, since they're personal friends, it's going to help Josh because the coaches can talk to Kyle Allen in ways they can't talk to Josh Allen, and Kyle can relay that to him in a way that a buddy can do. It's a nice step to have, and it's a nice way to communicate things to the roster, keep Josh pumped up and encouraged while still getting him to do the things he needs to do to get better. But that's why the quarterback room it's only now do people kind of realize that it's not just one, they're not competing against each other. Those guys are there to support the number one guy. Right. And that's how it works. And I think the Bills have got that really well situated.
Special teams is obviously near and dear to your heart. They actually extended their kicker, Tyler Bass, this offseason. They have some consistency now with Reed Ferguson. They have a punter in place. How do you feel about the special teams group? I think, most Bills fans feel pretty good about Tyler Bass now, but overall, kind of how does that look from a consistency standpoint because they've played together a bit now?
Yeah, I think Tyler is one of the best kickers in the league. And you need one here in Buffalo because the conditions are you struggle with them at times during the season. You got to have a guy that's got some chops and has got the right mentality. It's not going to get him because there's going to be some times when they're going to ask him to make a kick and it's just an impossible kick to make. Yep. There's just no two ways about it. And other teams, when they come in, they'll tell you, a 52-yarder with a crosswind and snow in your face, you're just not going to make the kick. You got to be ready to even try it and give it your best, and then not worry about it, and know that they're not going to cut you because you miss a kick like that. You got to have a certain mindset, and I think Tyler's in the perfect position for that because there are a lot of kicks that you didn't think he was going to make, and he does. So it works both ways, and he's the perfect guy for the city. He has worked really hard at it. Reed Ferguson, you want a long snapper who has the right chemistry with his kicker and his punter. The punter, Sam Martin, the Bills punted less than anybody in the league last year. But that doesn't mean he can't find ways to contribute. I think a veteran like him, it's been really nice to see him fold in with the roster and make sure that, whatever he can do outside of punting, he gets done. And, working with Tyler and the long snapper, Reed Ferguson, it's just part of his job. And those guys, when you get a veteran like that, they kind of understand the little things you got to do to make yourself valuable and indispensable.
So on defense, one probably the biggest loss I'd say overall for the Bills this year was Tremaine Edmonds. Their middle linebacker that they took the same year as Josh Allen, kind of expected him to become the cornerstone of the defense the way Josh was of the offense. He moves on to the Chicago Bears. A little bit of an odd wrinkle because they do take a linebacker in the draft, but Brandon Beane says, I don't view him as being a middle linebacker necessarily to replace Tremaine right away at least. So I guess what was the thought, because you have Matt Milano there who is a cornerstone of this defense. So what's maybe the thought behind why they take a linebacker that isn't necessarily going to step in and replace a Tremaine Edmonds?
Well, you got to have guys, athletes, and you look at your board, what's available in the draft, and the best option for your team, and that falls to Dorian. So they take the guy and they expect him to do his best. I don't think they are. I don't think there's too many teams in the league outside maybe the Chicago Bears who think they need a guy like that, and it's a history thing with the Bears. Mike Singletary, Dick Butkus, Brian Urlacher. There's a ton of guys there, and they feel like that's an important cog in their defense. And the Bills agree with that, not so much from a production standpoint as from the guy that's there. They don't want a leader on their defense who calls the plays, who has the green dot on his helmet, who makes the adjustments front and back and meshes the coverage with the front. They don't want that guy to be standing on the sideline on third down. They need the guy to be on the field for a 4 down as a linebacker in the middle of the defense. They don't want their leader on the sideline in a situational setting. That, I think the Bills put a lot in that, which is why Tremaine was so good on both sides of it. Great leader, great adjustments, student of the game. Guys trusted him and recognized his voice, and he was one of those guys. That's the kind of guy I think they're looking for as much as a guy who can run and thump people in the running game. So I'm looking forward to seeing that competition.
And then obviously another part of the defense, the defensive line. They actually just the other day extended Ed Oliver, which some people were excited about. Leonard Floyd, a brand new addition to the defense. You have Von Miller, obviously, hopefully coming back sometime soon from his ACL injury. So overall, it seems like they have quite a few pieces on that defensive front line, plus the young tight ends, Greg Rousseau, some of those guys. Are you kind of thinking, okay, there's putting on notice some of these younger defensive ends perhaps, or what's kind of the thought? Because they suddenly have a pretty deep depth chart there on the defensive line.
Well, I think they got a chance to sign some really good players, and you got to know as a pro, when there's a good player out there, he's going to help your team win. If they get him, they're going to want to get better. So I think every player realizes that they don't get to own the roster, and so certainly the defensive line, particularly defensive tackle, they didn't have anybody on the roster that was signed past this year until they extended Ed. So having Ed in-house and ready to, I think, says something to a lot of the players on the roster, guys they drafted and who've done everything they've asked them to do. They've re-signed and extended early. Tremaine, they didn't get that done with him, and he left. So he got a huge payday, and I think more so than the value that they had at that position. But I think on the defensive line, no question. I think defense in the NFL is not about run, stop the run anymore. It's about getting after the passer and getting turnovers. That's what it's about. And so getting tipped passes, getting sacks, forced fumbles. It's more of a play-making atmosphere in the NFL now rather than being a solid run defense and being tough to make a first down on and that kind of thing. The Bills were number one in the league and are very high in the league at preventing third down conversions, and they were really good against the run. They were top 3 defense in the league in a lot of categories, but it seemed at times they didn't make a play when you needed to make a play. Right. You would sacrifice being a top 3 defense maybe to be a top 8 defense, but make more plays and make more turnovers, get more stuff like that. Maybe give up some yards here, but get some turnovers over there. I think that might be kind of the philosophy or the goal that they've got in mind this year, that even if they're not ranked as high as they were under Leslie Frazier, and they were consistently, is perhaps getting a more timely situational football and getting a turnover, getting a big stop on 4th down, or a tip pass for an interception.
And obviously with the Leonard Floyd addition, perhaps they don't need to rush back Von Miller as quickly. Yeah. And a guy like Ed Oliver, who is very good at causing pressures but not always finishing. Now you have Leonard Floyd there to perhaps get the sack at the end there.
Well, that's what Ed is really good at. Ed's a disruptor, even if he's not it's disruption, not production. And that's what he does so well. He blows things up in the backfield. And you're right. You'd love to see in a perfect scenario, even if Vaughn's not ready for the first 6 weeks of the season. Like last year, he played the first 8 or 12 weeks of the season, then missed the last part. How about taking the first half off and coming down for the playoffs, and then with Leonard Floyd and getting acclimated and have those guys hit the playoffs at a dead run? That'd be ideal. And certainly Leonard Floyd gives him the chance that you have a quality pass rush with or without Vaughn. But I have no doubt that Vaughn's going to come back and the pass rush is going to be as good as it's been in Sean McDermott era.
Yep. And then obviously the cornerback position led by Trey White coming back now, hopefully fully healthy from his injury there. Khair Lam, 2nd year in the system there. Dane Jackson as well, who did a nice job filling in last year when they needed him. Overall, the cornerback group is, a stronger group, plus the safeties. You maybe part of the, blessing in disguise, if you will, with losing out on Tremaine Edmonds was a lot of people didn't expect Jordan Poyer to be back. They're able to put some money into him coming back with Micah Hyde. So the secondary overall, probably one of the stronger units in the NFL. How do you think they look this coming year?
Yeah, I think extremely tough. With Micah and Jordan coming back and getting those two guys back, and if they can stay healthy, along with Taylor Rapp behind them, who's a proven starter for the Rams, got a world championship under his belt as a starting safety. You've got Taron Johnson, who's still the most competitive and feisty nickel corner in the league, and Tre'Davious White, and early returns on him. When we've watched it, I've witnessed it myself. He is more like the guy he was 2 years ago before the injury. He seems much more free and easy, much more at peace with where he's at physically, mentally. I think he was bothered by his knee early last year, and he didn't make it back for a long time. He worked his way back slowly, and then when Damar Hamlin went down, I think that affected Trey a lot. I think he's one of those family-type guys who was really hurt by that. So I think his whole season was a little bit sabotaged there for the injury and also the Damar Hamlin incident. Kyer Elam, Christian Benford, two guys that really earned their way last year. I think their defensive secondary, I think they've got to have real high hopes for that group. I think it's going to be really difficult to get on the field and make the roster with the depth that they have, and they've added. Cam Dantzler today was signed by the club, so he's got 3 years of starting for the Minnesota Vikings under his belt. So it's a quality group over there, very much so.
Right. And, one thing with the defense, obviously they lose Leslie Frazier, who's been with the team for a while now, obviously had very highly rated defenses, but maybe caught some criticism for how the defense showed up in the playoffs, things like that. Sean McDermott all of a sudden is going to take a much more active role in this defense, almost, a quote-unquote defensive coordinator and head coach now. So I guess from your perspective, how does that work when the head coach takes a more active role? Because does that take away from his overall kind of look at the team because he's so focused on the defense, or how does that work?
Well, that's an interesting question. We don't know that yet. Certainly it can. I mean, defensive coordinator is a tough spot to be in, particularly when when you want to talk to your defense after a tough series or whatever happens. A head coach, if he's a defensive coordinator, is tempted to go talk to those guys, which means he turns his back on the field and goes and talks to him, and he's watching the offense. He's got to trust his staff to be there or to talk to the defense. That's a tough spot to be in. It's a hard balance to strike, but certainly he's got a strong staff. Al Holcomb's going to help an immense amount. Bob Babbage, he's got some guys over there that know what they're doing, and they're going to work through this. I think him calling the plays, as he's done at times with Leslie in the fold anyway. He's a little more aggressive, I've heard. We don't know yet. But I think you can bet that the defense will change somehow, some way, significantly, in ways perhaps we don't even perceive. But having a different guy call all the plays all the time is certainly going to make a difference, just because of his personality and the fact that it's the head coach. I mean, ain't nobody going to second guess him on the sideline, right? If he wants to do it, he's going to do it. And that's not all bad to have a guy that can make the call, and we can all live with it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us today. Obviously, a human wealth of knowledge of football. We're lucky to have him be part of Team West Herr. So thanks, Steve. And hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you during the season like we did on the podcast. For everyone here, I'm Brad Gelber for Steve Tasker. Thanks for joining us today.